All right, we are live and recording on the internets. Hello again to anyone new or old. I am Actual Wizard, joined by my wonderful co-host Fox, and we are here talking about Practical Guide to Evil, a story about a short girl climbing the corporate ladder through murder, deceit, lies. Um, and other fun tools while trying to not kill everybody.
Makes my corporate job positively boring.
And hey, Espiquare is here.
Yeah.
Yay! Espiquare is live in chat.
Oh,
Um,
hello.
yeah. Espiquare is a frequent figure in the PGtE server, and overall a cool person from what I've seen of their chat logs. But yeah,
Amazing. Do I
so
need to turn somewhere to see this, or
you would
you
need
can read it
to,
out to me?
yeah,
Cool.
you would need to to actually watch the Twitch broadcast um
Oh.
to see chat. Um, the link is in the little town crier channel on the Discord. And if you want, you can have that just like muted so it's not like double layer sound.
Oh, right. Well, maybe next time I
Yeah,
will
maybe
run
next time,
all the
maybe next time.
extra things.
Yeah, exactly. But we've got chapters to discuss.
Yes. And
Um,
I like this one.
yes. Chapter 27. Cut. The worst sin a villain can commit is to hesitate. Um, Dread Empress Maleficent II, which is.
But I mean, the heroes are coming. The heroes are coming.
yeah.
Gotta, gotta do evil while the sun is still out.
Yeah, sucks. Um, we have this interesting moment of, I think, what's actually a really good point of so speaking to what just happened a little bit ago. um oh, and thank you, Fragilities, for following. um what just happened is Cat battled inside of her soul, inside of her name, alongside her name, to try and um
Awaken.
rush the development of her third aspect, which would give her enough power to like just deck Eris in the mouth. Aqua Sahelian.
And
And
the demon.
now she's dealing with the fallout of that. Was there a particular point in this chapter that you really liked that you wanted to talk about?
So I really like the beginning part with Apprentice. Like, you know that he's sort of like, nerdy, very competent, but this is sort of a different side of him. I think that you see, sort of being that, you know, hyper competent spellcaster who, is very assertive. And I think we've seen him sort of, we've talked about how his character sort of fluxed from who he started out as in the series to who he becomes later on. But I think that this sort of puts him really on the road to being sort of, authoritative and a bit pedantic in his own realm, where he is just such an expert at all sorts of different things. I mean, he's just, field soul surgery. Sure, let's do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Just battlefield surgery on the most delicate part of the human like being. Um, you know, literally brain surgery, but something that is like it's basically, yeah, the fantasy equivalent of brain surgery is soul surgery. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so interesting to me how this chapter starts off, because in hindsight, I think it's a really great example of of oh, what's the unreliable narrator, because it's presented to us in such a different style in these little glimpses and tiny cutaways,
Mm-hmm.
and because it uses words like "she's awake," an orc's voice said, not Hakram's, you know, and orcs. I recognized it. Male, adjutant, trustworthy. Um, and then take another step and I'll activate the words on you, someone barked. Spoken, Mithua, Sonunkite, the son of Warlock, apprentice. These things that, you can think to yourself, oh, oh, I don't know if there's a trope for specifically like the flashes of consciousness, but in this case, I think it's a really great example of unreliable narrator, because we're just as unsure as the people in the operating room, um, as to whether or not the demon has taken over Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of very bare style that is being used for this first chunk, um, could be a good sign of being inhuman, or it could just be that Kat has gotten the shit kicked out of her inside of her immortal soul, and so she's not feeling quite up to the usual level of brain activity.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's just a wonderful use of shifting the style of writing in order to achieve an effect not only on replicating a real thing in those flashes of consciousness, but also in introducing a bit of that unsureness in the audience itself. Anyways,
I
that's
Oh
that's
no, I was
that's
gonna
my
say
thing.
I really agree with that. And I think it's really interesting too, because without the extra narrative around sort of these little flashes, there's enough there that you can sort of fill in the blanks. And I think that everybody has had that experience where, you've had a fever, you're a little bit delirious, you're sort of like, what is going on? And so when I read the section, even though it is sort of bare in description, like I was able to use my own experiences to sort of really fill in and make it quite a rich scene. And so I thought that that was a very clever way of sort of portraying the sort of, yeah, is this still Kat? What is going on? But also it could just be that she's half delirious.
Yeah. It's a great moment where the author is showing trust in his readers. That they can just be told this and not shown from an outside point of view that Cat is delirious or Cat is possessed by a demon.
Mm-hmm.
I think it wouldn't be as effective a scene if it left that first person perspective and was instead just kind of like essentially a camera on the wall watching uh, adjutant and apprentice talking over Cat's delirious body.
Definitely.
Yeah. Um,
And then I also really like the next part for more of sort of apprentice's characterization. Like it's sort of, he goes from being this sort of very authoritative figure who does express that, like, he'd be mutilating her soul and she could die, and was sort of hesitant about that, to sort of this concerned friend. And it's, I think, a really nice contrast to his character, and something that really makes him sort of more of a human character, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. It's got kind of that It's got the feeling of like famous lines like the I'm a doctor, not a mechanic or something like that, or I'm a mechanic, not a doctor. Where he's giving it his best, and he knows that he has to be the smartest person in the room because that's what Katniss trusted him to be. But this
Yeah.
is also like just on the edge of his knowledge base.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about Mizego's character is that he sort of, as we've gotten to this point in the story, we sort of understand that he's socially awkward, might be on the spectrum, but sort of after they talk about her condition and, how she has lost some feeling in some of her limbs and her face, and she sort of feels like she has this phantom limb, he says, you don't have to do that, He finally said, I was raised by a villain. I know we're not untouchable. We bleed. We cry. I can't afford either of those, I said, keeping my voice calm. I don't have the time for it. I don't think you can afford not to. Not anymore, Apprentice said. Black, I started, wept when he buried his parents. Mizego interrupted me gently. Father was there, so I know. And I just think that that's such an interesting. It's interesting that he has such a deep insight into sort of emotions and feelings, and yet he is the one that has to sort of learn these things
Yeah.
by being told, and he doesn't have perhaps the instinctual grasp that other people might have, and maybe that's why he's better at it. But I thought that that was just such a cool contrast
Yeah, yeah,
into his
and
character.
for me, as someone who has like a huge issue with Sherlock type characters, the super geniuses
Mm-hmm.
being always described as essentially like two-dimensional and they only have like two facets. They're either super super smart or an asshole.
Yeah.
That's their limit of human expression.
Yeah.
This kind of thing is like, yeah, you can absolutely have a more clinically inclined mind like Apprentice, and that doesn't mean you lose out on compassion, you know?
Yeah. And I
Uh,
think one of the things, and I don't think that we talked about it on online, but you and I sort of talked about it offline.
mm,
That's really awesome about this series in general is how well it does representation. And I think that this is just such a great representation of a neuroatypical person, and it how it's not that caricature that you were just talking about with the Sherlock type characters where, you either are sort of in the I am a robot and I'm only analytical and logical, or I absolutely don't know how to interact with another human being and therefore I'm just an asshole because what you're saying is not logical. And I really appreciate that in EE's writing. And I think that there's these little scenes that are just really cleverly worked in that
yeah,
just make the representation feel super normal.
yeah. And then uh, the addition of little lines like, I was honestly more worried when you started bantering with Hakram than when you came in barely able to walk, after meeting the devils and watching all of her, watching her whole contingent of wounded get slaughtered. You know,
Yeah.
people don't just walk off that kind of experience, Catherine, not even those names. I do, I spoke through gritted teeth. I shouldn't have to tell you how dangerous it is for a villain to lie to themselves. Whew!
Hard truths, Mazego, but someone needs to say it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think, too, the other thing that really stood out to me in this particular chapter is how well EE writes compassion without sort of just putting after every single sentence, he said compassionally. He
Yeah.
said, sadly.
Yeah, exactly. Without it getting like sappy or like, you know, kind of feeling like, okay, yeah, can we not have this? Like, this is it doesn't clash with the tone. It fits into it. It folds into it very well.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Um,
So next scene, we're like back in the back in the thick of planning from her sick bed. I mean, you really have to feel for Kat in this. It's
Yeah.
like she just came out of major soul surgery, and it's like, well, now we have to plan the troop deployment because the demon you just fought and who kind of kicked your ass. Still, but in the real world now.
Yeah.
So one of the things I thought was sort of interesting, particularly in sort of contrast with the last line that Mizago left Kat with, was her insistence to Hakram that, like, you know, in 2 days she's going to be in fighting shape. And
Yeah.
how Adjutant, unlike Mizago, and I guess this really sort of illustrates the difference in the relationship, where sort of Mizago came into the group as a bit of an equal. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, Warlock was basically like, you treat my son right, or I'm going to come and kill you.
Yeah.
Sovereign of the Red Skies for a reason.
Yeah.
And so, even though Hakram, you know, does want to, or appears to want to tell Kat, like, you know, you probably do need to sit this one out. And he sort of says it in saying, you know, there would be no shame in sitting this one out, Kat. You're still recovering. He, in the end, acquiesces to her insistence that she's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that I think really sort of builds in those really interesting interactions between the characters and makes it so that you don't just sort of have the typical, you know, Final Fantasy party of five, like the mage does all the mage things and the fighter does all the fighter things. Like they all sort of have those roles, like thief is thief, but they also have these like very different layers of their interpersonal connections that have been built in through the story. So I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely agree. It's wonderful seeing the different ways in which their relationships, not only as name but as people, kind of influence the way they talk to each other, you know? If
Mm-hmm.
Masego says sit down to Catherine because he's giving her like medical advice, she's gonna sit down whether she wants to, or if Masego has to like chain her to a chair, you know?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like, Adjutant doesn't tell Cat to do things. Adjutant just provides her with options.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, clearly, like, he's the adjutant for a reason. And so his role is sort of to be a subordinate to Kat. But it is, I think it is just sort of like an interesting glimpse into sort of the hierarchical structure of the 15th and how they all sort of play their parts. And then a little bit more into the planning, Kat sort of re expresses her faith in Juniper. I wave him away pleasantly, keeping the dismay off my face. I knew everything was in good hands. If anyone could prepare Marchford for what was coming, it was Juniper.
Yeah.
But I could not quell the feeling that this entire situation was slipping out of my grasp. Like, I like that she has such faith in her friends and colleagues, and just, basically, it's just another shout out to Juniper being a badass. And
Yeah.
Juniper, as somebody who doesn't have a name so far in the story, and being sort of that hyper competent badass, I really appreciate it. I also really like sort of quote unquote confidence porn, so
Yeah.
I would read an entire book about Juniper. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it oh, is it during? No, it's later in the book, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Um, but uh, but yeah, and then we have a nice smexy time with Killian and Kat. Um, small shout out to E. It's I don't think it's quite important enough to the overall chapter to like discuss it, but uh just a small note that it's really great how genuinely and not like erotic he makes their intimacy. There's obviously
Mm-hmm.
eroticism in it because they're lovers, and that's a huge, like, the physical part of it is huge for them. but it's just like, yeah, we like being together. I'm not gonna hyperfixate on like certain parts of her anatomy pressing against me, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
And I have to say that in sort of the fantasy genre, which definitely has many authors who sort of like tip into like, I don't know, their hidden desire to write like softcore porn,
yeah.
that, you know, it is a very
She walked
tasteful, like just
boobily.
yeah, exactly, like fade to black. And more focused on sort of exactly what you just said, like the relationship and not like this paragraph upon paragraph of like, I don't know, Killian's like, I don't know, soft, pillowy breasts or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
appreciated. And I also really like how sex positive EE is throughout this entire series. And I think it's really shown well here
Yeah.
that it's, yeah, not porny. He's not a prude. But it's just sort of like, this is what people do. And
Yeah.
particularly people who are in sort of these, like, you know, really
Yeah.
high stress situations. So
High
it's,
stress situations, they're all between the ages of like 18 to 25. Um,
yeah,
and a lot of them are constantly thinking like, I'll probably die tomorrow. You know,
yeah.
it's it's not great. And it's not a great environment to have inhibitions.
yeah.
And so it's really cool. This whole chunk here is just beautiful, beautiful, frankly, romance writing. Um,
It really just shows like the breadth of EE's writing ability, that you can go from sort of the scenes that we had earlier that was sort of like a caring friendship to sort of the different relationship Adjutant has, and then Killian is also in a different place with Kat, and none of the sections feel jarring against each other. um but narratively, like the scenes are so different, all in sort of the same small windowless warded room.
yeah, yeah. And okay, one quick line I want to admire. Um, and Kat is in the middle of like freaking out about how she is so massively in over her head, and this desperate grab for power she's made has only sunk her further into the waters. And now she's worrying less about herself and more about the fact that, like, I might have doomed you all to die because I just wanted to save this city when, protocol dictates, as Juniper stated earlier, that we fucking abandon it. They're rebels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, uh, what if I condemned us all to worse than death just because I wanted to be principled for once, because I wanted to do the right thing? The words came out better than I thought they'd would. There's been squires before you, Killian whispered back. There will be squires after you. But we're not following a name, you see. We're following Catherine Foundling. And I don't think she's out of the game yet. Whoo, baby!
Such a
Beautiful.
lovely line,
Yeah.
particularly with Catherine's character development, sort of the trajectory that she's on, and her being Catherine Foundling being more important than being the name, I think is a theme that sort of, I think, maybe planted a bit earlier on, and but becomes more apparent here, because I think that in earlier chapters we're very focused on sort of her being the squire, and having a name is very special and important, and it is in this world, but
Yeah.
we're sort of moving into a phase where Catherine being Catherine is more important than the name that she happens to be carrying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we'll see how, like, it goes on, further into the future where people are giving qualities and ascribing, they're talking about Catherine in a way that other people don't talk about Black. And if Squire's supposed to be a transitional name into the Black Knight, it's very clear that like there's maybe not obvious, but big departures from her path and Amadeus's.
Mhm.
But yeah. Are we ready to go to the next chapter?
Yes, we should go to the next chapter.
Booyah. Chapter 28, Prelude. Look, if he didn't want to be fed to my acid-spewing crocodiles, he shouldn't have brought me bad news. Dread Emperor Malignant II, the particularly petty.
I love how some of the Dread Emperors are like just like straight up crazy pants. Like
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
them,
they are the parody of a Bond villain. You know?
yeah. Like some of them really, really confident. Dread Empress triumphant, may she never return.
Yeah, may she
But
never
some of
return,
them
press
are
him over the
just,
forehead.
yeah, exactly. Some of them are just like weird clowns. And you think, how did this person
Yeah.
rise to the position of Dread Emperor? Like,
Yeah,
what a
no.
weird, broken place Preyas must be.
Yeah, yeah. Just thinking about like Traitorius and stuff like that. Traitorous, traitorous. Um, but yeah, and then finally, a proper Calowan breakfast, which having had a full English and a full Scottish breakfast, holy shit, that stuff is a pick me up. It's amazing.
It's also like lunch and dinner combined, though. I have to
Yeah.
admit, as someone who doesn't really do more than coffee for breakfast, just the thought of having eggs, sausage, black pudding, and a generous portion of buttered bread, just like, oh, I mean, I get you're going into
Oh my
battle, so you need to
goodness.
like eat up, but like, ugh.
That is where it starts with a full English, because with a full English you also have essentially like grilled tomato slices and
Okay. Oh, and
weirdly enough like
beans.
baked beans. Yeah, yeah.
I do like the baked
Um,
beans.
the sausage or the black pudding is more often replaced by like rashers, which are essentially bacon that doesn't suck.
Hmm.
Because it doesn't shrivel up into like a crunchy bookmark. It stays the size it was cut at and just becomes like nice meat, you know?
Oh, I think in Canada we call that Canadian bacon.
Well,
And then bacon is like the bacon you guys have down in the
yeah,
States.
yeah, 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 but the Canadian bacon is like the disc one, right?
Uh, yes, it sort of
Yeah, yeah.
has a
So it's
rounded
it's
edge to it,
picture
like a
essentially
ham.
between Canadian bacon and bacon, you've got a rasher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Just
Um,
delicious pork belly. Can't complain.
just delicious pork belly. But yeah, so um,
I like the little sort of like glimpse we get into, well, both Calawan culture, because I feel
mhm,
like this breakfast really roots us into sort of like that, medieval England that we sort of know Callow is based upon. But it
yeah,
gives you sort of a really clear picture of like what this tavern must look like in your head. But I also really like the discussion about tea and tea imports that sort of follows immediately after. And
yeah,
giving us like that idea of what the commerce and the trade in Calnaria is, and how tea in Callow is sort of, not a luxury item, but good tea is.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's an interesting look uh into how commerce and culture affect cuisine equally. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just like how the rest of like Europe and England were they were opened up to tomatoes at the same time as Italy. And the only
Oh,
reason
interesting.
why yeah, because it was the entire continent of Europe, the old world, that came into contact with the new world where tomatoes were actually, native.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why Italy is known for its tomato dishes and in England they're a side dish that is like, what the fuck did you do to this tomato?
Why did you
Um,
ruin it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, the reason why is because they thought tomatoes were poisonous because England was on average wealthier than Italy at the time. And
Hmm.
so they ate on like nice lead plates with lead cutlery, and the acid in the tomato leached the lead in the cutlery into the food, and they died from poisoning. Meanwhile, Italy only had like wood for their primary like cooking and eating utensils.
Right.
So they were just like, "Oh, fuck yeah, tomatoes."
Tomatoes are delicious. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so interesting. Huh, I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
that.
Um,
Wow,
yeah, history is fun. Um,
definitely.
so long as you view it as more than numbers and names.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and then I'm Lily. Hello, Lily. I'm Kat. Are you a deer wraith? Lily, get off that bench right this instant. Um, I'm not little. I'm 6. You know, it's the wonderful the Tony Hawk experience.
Tony Hawk's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. There's
But
no
what?
way a person this famous could be in front of me right now.
Just like chilling. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and also they're probably not short. So
You
there's
look
no
taller in
way
your
this is the
video
squire.
games.
This is just some, short, aren't you a little short to be the squire? Um,
Right. The other thing I really like about that sort of like that little interaction that you just highlighted was it tells us something about who the Dirith are on the continent as well, and that it's a bit rude to
yeah.
ask if somebody is of that ethnicity, and I don't really think that we've met them yet.
No, no, we
But
haven't really met them. That'll be really book 3 stuff, I think. Um,
yeah, coming soon,
yeah,
coming
coming
soon.
soon to a theater near you. Um,
But just such an interesting introduction to them, where you sort of get the idea that like, oh, it's a bit rude to ask
yeah,
if you're a Jerry. Okay, who are these
yeah,
people?
yeah. Excuse me, I'd like to know.
Yeah, but off
Uh,
we go. We don't get to know.
yeah, yeah. And uh, and then the fear in like Marchford is still technically like a rebel city, so being super familiar with the legion that's currently putting your city under martial law is like not the smartest move. Uh, um,
One of the things that was sort of interesting is that you do sort of see that the common people, um, while there is a sort of like political game going on up top with like the countess and the rebels, the common people are sort of like, okay, but like we hear there's a demon outside of the city, and will the
yeah.
legion stay?
Hmm.
And I think that that sort of really like reflects even in modern politics, where they say, it's the stuff that people talk about at their kitchen table that really makes the difference, and no one truly cares that much, although we all should go vote,
Yeah.
who's in the legislature and Congress.
Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
sort of like discussions aren't what people are sort of thinking about every day.
Yeah. Um, and it it's just interesting um how how much of the people here are people, and that becomes like an important part of Catherine's character, is that I don't stand for ideals, I don't stand for a name, I don't stand for a crown, I stand for Lily, whose name I'm going to frankly forget within like 3 chapters because she's not important to the plot,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
she's still important because she's a life in this country.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that has been done sort of like interestingly by E in this part of the story as well is sort of showing that while the legions of terror are terrifying and they have all of these horrors on their side, they're also sort of good what you would hope that a good army would be in sort of an occupied territory, in a territory that they're reconquering as sort of a occupied province, where the innkeeper says that tall orc, the one they call Dead Hand, he
Mm-hmm.
stopped it being the riots before it got out of hand. The innkeeper continued, and Tribune Ratface has been making rounds to see that the people displaced by the goblins are properly fed. It's brought a lot of goodwill with those of us who remember the last war. Armies are not easy guests, no matter who they obey. And so just seeing these sort of like little glimpses of how Catherine has managed to surround herself by good people who can make these sort of like decisions, while good decisions, while being on this, ostensible side of capital E evil,
Mm-hmm.
um, is just really interesting.
Yeah. And then the funny part, the real Tony Hawk moment. I suppose it helps you have a Calvin in charge of the Legion, she decided, turning a curious eye on me. You ever met her, the Squire? A few times, I agreed. um, it may not be a mad thing, you get my meaning? If the Empire is, referring to a Calvin being a villain. If the Empire is going to stick around, we might as well have a voice in the tower. Heard she helped hang Mazes, so she can't be all evil. Nasty person work, that man. Um, and then, of course, the Lieutenant Tortoise, who works for Hakram, comes in, and Lieutenant, I greeted her. Lady Squire, she replied, fist over her heart. I apologize for describing your apprentice for board council, blah. It's like, oh my god, it's Tony Hawk.
It's Tony Hawk.
Holy shit. What? You're not you're not Tony Sparrow? Like, whew. Um and then like the tiny moment of like Cat doesn't Cat doesn't stop being Cat just because she's now the Squire. She turns around and says, "When the enemy is sighted, take your family to the center of the city. It'll be the safest place."
And she also
Just
paid for her meal.
yeah, and she also paid for her meal. Uh, over 15 times what the meal was worth, but hey,
Yeah,
we tip well, all right?
exactly.
If it happens to be 1,500%, then okay.
No one's carrying small coins anymore. They don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
they don't have credit cards yet in
yeah,
this world.
yeah. There's nowhere to write the tap the 20% button on the screen and have it all do the math for you. Um, and now we get to see the super fun bit of uh, all of this all this planning starting to happen. Um, and uh, we have the sorry, my brain is scrambled like those eggs.
No,
Um,
I was going to say one of the things that I like about this section is, and even the section before, that even though it was like a little bit slower pace,
mhm,
I think, and it's a nice interlude, it's not boring. Like you get all of these really, I think, important insights that make the story just so
yeah,
rich. And I think that these particular setup chapters, uh, specifically the ones where they go over the tactics, become so important in the immediately following chapters, so that you have an idea of what exactly is happening. I do feel that a lot of times authors are describing a battle and maybe they see it really clearly in their head, although maybe they have like sort of that DC action camera cutscene thing going on. They
yeah,
also don't know what's going on.
yeah,
But usually
yeah,
it just feels like such a jumble. You're just like, I don't know. Hero is somewhere, sword, stab.
yeah. And it also helps make it helps bring the focus. It helps shift the style of battle because otherwise it's all right. We've got two rows of dudes lined up on a field. Let's battle over this dwarven mountain. Um, Instead, it's all right. We've made these plans with these things in these positions. Like it makes this kind of deliberate, tactical, more, it makes this style of battle not only easier to view, like you said, it also makes it a lot easier to believe.
Yeah. And also, I think it's such a good way to show and not tell like how brilliant the other members of the 15th are. So, for example, sort of partway through, Pickler says, I spent most of my time setting up our kill zone. Pickler smiled unpleasantly, spindly fingers tracing the rectangle I told Mazego to leave out of his rituals. When the devils come, they'll be warmly received.
Mm.
Cat nods. And the spears? They'll go through the west. Juniper grunted. Quickest way to get to the hearth. And that's what they'll be aiming for. There's a wider avenue where their horse will be able to charge properly. And I think that just showing that these characters have these thoughts and these plans and they've done these things is so much more impactful on, us knowing that, Cat's got a great team and they're super competent, as we talked about before, without just being like, Juniper was a brilliant general, greatest
Mm.
mind of her generation. Like they say
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
it's reinforced by all of these scenes where they show it.
Yeah. It's just great. And other great things, like noting where Robber's going to be and the fact that he's going to be doing his own thing, which is becoming more and more of a part of Cat's standard toolkit, is essentially saying, hey, Robber, fuck shit up, but in like this general direction, you know?
Yeah, in an organized manner, create
Yeah,
chaos for
yeah.
me.
um, Robber may not be the most tactical mind, but everyone else talks about, and it's again reinforced, like you said, that hey, he has his battle strengths, and that kind is that he's just a friggin' phenomenal skirmish leader.
Mm-hmm.
If you need someone to know when to pull out of a battle and make a fight be as long and painful as possible while giving ground, he is absolutely your dude.
Yeah, he's your goblin.
Yeah, he's your goblin.
And then the other line I really like from the section of this chapter, luck in battle, I told my officers. Luck is for amateurs. Juniper replied with bare teeth, I have a plan.
Yeah.
Although then Cat kind of is just like, ooh, if there was
Yeah.
ever to be a motto for the 15th, I decided that would be it. I'll have a plan. Watch how it goes south.
Yeah. Oh man. And and
And then
then
we meet up with Archer again.
yeah, and then we meet up with Archer because we need to have a chat. Um
And she says hello in her friendly Archer way.
yeah,
The
by
knife.
throwing a knife at her neck. Um
I like that. You can throw faster than that, I said. I can, Archer agreed, finally bothering to face me. But this is still slightly swifter than a mundane mortal could manage. She'd been
yeah.
checking how much my name had been affected by my latest debacle. Fair enough, even though this is an idiot way to go about it.
Yeah. I'm told you won't talk with my legate, I grunted. I don't speak charms with minions, she replied easily. Legate. She's my legate. Regardless, here I am. Have you made a decision? Um, and if anything, my abruptness seemed to amuse her. My irritation ratcheted up a notch in response. While your battle is not unworthy, it is not mine, she shrugged. Hunter and I will leave when the enemy assaults the city. We'll kill a few on the way out of politeness. Just, just that, just that beautiful little sass. And then the mega brain that Cat doesn't even know she's using by just saying fine. Wait, no, no, you're supposed to talk to me. Wait,
Yeah,
no, stop. Try and convince me, please.
try to convince me. I didn't actually mean no.
Yeah. Um, I don't have the time or patience with this kind of game. You'll fight or you won't. I get the feeling not much I say will tip the balance either way. And then and then it's just this straight up like, "Oh, are you sure you can't have me help you?" And Kat just fucking laughs in her face. And it's not for me, it's not like a crazy laugh. It's not like a stupid loud laugh. It's that it's that laugh that it's that laugh that the guy who played live action J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man, the same in the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The one where he just like sits back and just you know,
Yeah.
you're serious?
Yeah.
I'm always in a fucking corner. Um, and then just perfect taunt. So scuttle off if you want to. I don't need you to make this a victory. You think one less aspect in Olymp is going to stop me? I don't win fights because I'm the squire. I win them because I'm Catherine Foundling. Watch them take a swing, see where it gets them. Which is the best way that you can get Archer interested in you in any single way. Like it's
Yeah. Without even knowing her, she manages to hit upon like the key
yeah.
to making her interested in this battle.
Yeah, yeah. Is by making sure that it's not that one, I'm not going to owe you anything. This is not a you get to be better than me and flex it, which is, as we'll learn later, a relationship type that she's fairly used to. Um, and instead is one where she's like openly mocked, even though she knows she's better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's so great and it's so perfectly Catherine. I love this chapter so much. Just for this last interaction alone. Um, this dialogue between Archer and Kat is just chef kiss.
I think it also just so perfectly, we've just met Archer, and
Hmm.
it just so perfectly shows sort of a core element of her personality that we explore further in
Yeah.
the series, but that he sort of like that need to be needed and that
Yeah.
sort of, wanting Kat to talk her into it is and having, a challenge and being that challenger is such
Yeah.
a core part of Archer, and it's just so perfectly encapsulated there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's less. I think maybe I'd say it's less of a need to be needed and more of she needs to be wanted.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, she has so little of that in her own life, um, which again we'll see later. But this feeling of no, I don't need you. I want you to be here because you'd help make the victory more secure, but I'm still going to fucking win. So if you want to scuttle away like a little bitch, then fine, but
Yeah.
um, and
All
then
right.
interlude
Interlude. This is
Greenskins.
a great interlude. So I'm glad we still have some time
Oh
for it.
yes.
This is a great interlude.
The Carson word
And
for war is derived from the one used for a full cook pot. That tells you everything you need to know about how the clans think of creation. Extract from Horrors and Wonders, famed travelogue of Anabas the Assuran. Again, we so we so rarely get to see glimpses of greenskin culture, either goblin or orc, and that's, for various reasons. Orcs because they got literally basically culturally genocided, and goblins because they don't want you to know.
Yeah, super secretive.
Yeah, super secretive. Um, that was a mistake, Lieutenant Balker offered. It got worse, Captain Clicker suggested instead, flirtatiously allowing her teeth to peek through her chops. She did have superb canines, Robert was forced to admit, but she was no pickler. what just what a beautiful way. If you didn't, it's such a great way to just bam slam into a chapter talking about the differences between human and non-human cultures and stuff like that. Um,
I also love these chapters because, as we just said, the goblin culture is so secretive that, like, really the only glimpses we get into it truly are sort of like the interludes that we spend with the various
yeah,
goblin characters, and Robber's a fan favorite, and
yeah.
so we do spend a fair amount of time with him, and this might be the first time we do sort of get to
Get to
get
spend with
to
him
meet
as
him, but
specifically a viewpoint character. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, but I really sort of like that sort of we learn that he's, a boy from the Rockbreaker tribe. We
yeah.
already knew that Pickler was the daughter of a matron line. But, that was a punchline to a joke about overreaching, not a plan of action. Unlike humans, the tribes didn't glorify people trying to love above their social stature. They buried them in shallow graves.
Exactly.
I
It's
love that.
just it's things that we already kind of know vaguely. Like we're like, oh yeah. It's a matriarchal society. And
Yes.
then we're like, no. This is a matriarchal dictatorship. Like
Yes. And that
and
is
not
so
not a kind
hierarchical.
one in any way. Um and for all that the 15th was not the Grey Iries, there would always be that invisible line there. He'd long made his peace with that. You're all amateurs, he told his minions. And no, that wasn't another suggestion. Clearly we should be going with, I can't believe that worked. A murmur of approval from the ranks, though some filthy traitorous elements dissented. Fear the goats, someone called out. The one true motto of the 15th. Captain Borer, write that mana for insubordination and poor taste. That's a woman, sir, the captain told him. Lieutenant Radler. You're sure? That's clearly a man's nose. Radler flipped him off. Add to the list that she was emotionally hurtful.
I just love this entire chapter. We could read it out loud, and I would just giggle along. Like
Oh
this,
my god, just listen. All right. If
Robert is
anybody
just
needs
great.
to get sold on the comedic elements of Practical Guide Evil, just have them read Interlude Greenskins. They're going to miss out on some stuff because obviously this is fucking like neck deep in book 2. But come on.
Yeah, and you just get like we were talking about. You get sort of a glimpse into the goblin culture, and then now you get to sort of like understand a little bit about the sappers. Running a sapper cohort wasn't like leading regulars. For one, sappers were all insane. You had to be to willingly choose a career path that would see you deal with notoriously volatile munitions on a daily basis. There was also the fact that they were the most lightly armed soldiers in the legions of terror, yet regularly saw action on the front lines. That was fine, because leading crazy people, in Robert's opinion, was a lot like being in prison. If you wanted your authority unquestioned, you had to walk up to the biggest prisoner in the cell block, rip out their eyes, and make a necklace out of them. Metaphorically speaking. So
So
far.
far, anyway.
Anyway. And so I think that, like, in that hilarious paragraph, like, you just learn so much about, like, where this type of soldier fits
Yeah.
within the 15.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious.
Yeah, and then enemy in sight. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? The Allied Tribute called out. That's the sound fun makes when it begins. He saw more than a few sappers shiver in eager anticipation. Crazy, the lot of them. So let me hear it before you get to battle positions. What's the operational creed of this cohort? Kill them! Take their stuff! Robert faked wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. Considering goblins didn't have tear ducts, the absurdity was delightful. Go forth, my minions, he cackled. Oh, man. God, what an amazing, amazing way to start off this thing. And then, even more comedically, we jump straight to the most dour, by the books greenskin of the whole bunch, Juniper. Our guests have arrived, I should say. Which, real quick note, beautiful way to, like, you have a couple different ways to connect montages, and it's excellent that since EE has chosen all these different greenskins to be put in different locations, which not only one helps us actually go to them, but also helps us get different perspectives on the battlefield as it's happening from these different characters. Um, it's really great that he's connecting it via similar moments in time. So
Mm-hmm.
just as we're seeing the 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 signal that the enemies are coming, and we see a little bit after that, now we're going to our guests have arrived. You know,
Yeah. And then Juniper, word from the west, the hellhound asked. The enemy hasn't engaged, the mage overlooking that particular bull informed her. The grim-faced orc repressed the urge to sigh. Humans, she
she
thought
thought unkindly.
unkindly.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. What do the silver spears look like, Sergeant? How are they modified by the corruption? And then we find out that they're absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, yeah. The men-at-arms had been visibly mutated, growing cysts of flesh filled with dark pus.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, worse. Some had eyes blinking from all over their faces or even their hands. Though the most disgusting of it was the way their bodies now overflowed their armor. I mean, to me, the eyes, the multiple eyes thing is just like the grossest because I think I have like, I forget what the word is, but like that fear of like things with holes. Ugh. Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
Trypophobia.
thought, just, yes, trypophobia. Ugh, just grosses me out.
Yeah,
We could
yeah.
stop there and I would just be horrified.
Yeah.
But it gets worse.
Yeah, it gets worse because, of course, now you've got fucked up pseudo centaurs of metal with the fact that the cataphracts have essentially been welded inside of their armor and to their horse and to their horse's armor.
Ugh.
Yeah, we're just gonna.
Ugh. Patches of flesh falling away from their flanks and long strings.
Yeah. um, and of course there's one cataphract who's different and uh, whose helmet was twisted into a sordid, unmoving metal grin. The maid shivered at her side, but the hellhound remained unmoved. Just the fact that, like, Juniper takes in all of this, which is causing everyone in her tent who's looking at the portal to be like, "Bleh, yeah, no, don't like." And she's just like, "Okay, cool, but how am I gonna kill that?" You know?
Yeah, totally.
Um, the last cataphract seemed likely going to be the leader of the host, though how the led the Silver Spears were still were was debatable. Worth making a priority target, but not launching a specific assault to take it out. She doubted morale would be an issue for the former mercenaries, as far gone as they were. Um, and fun little bit of foreshadowing in bait and switch will be effective for something down the line that we'll talk to when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you know, this thing of like calmly putting her orders through. Um, she's not happy with how Foundling, like, she's just taking this all through as like a chess game almost of just like, okay, I need to assess. Nock's not the best fit. I get why it happened. Hume would have been better, but whatever. Um,
One of the really sort of neat things
yeah,
is the next sort of introspection into Juniper's character that sort of the last major paragraph provides, and also gives some insight into some of the other orc generals, where it says, it came from her mother's blood. She was sure of it, that deep, dark part of her that looked upon the battlefield and bared its fangs in joy. General Istrid was famous for being one of the only Pracy generals who fought in the ranks. And while the Hellhound believed that Marshal One Eye's way was the best, there was a trace of that hunger in her. She dedicated her whole life to the art of war because there was something in her that sang when she gave orders, and the arrow loosed by her mind found the enemy's throat. Orcs are born in love with death, the old saying went, and what mortal lover could possibly compare? That was the boon and the curse of her people. And I just love that.
yeah,
It's so poetic,
yeah,
and then you learn so much about Juniper.
yeah, exactly. That like ultimately behind all of this cold analytical mind, it's just her way of expressing her orc kind of like warlust almost, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yeah,
uh
and then sort
Gods
of
forgive
the
her, but she was almost grateful to Eris, you know? When
yeah
Juniper was done sinking her teeth into the Battle of Marchford, the blood spilled would splatter all over the pages of history. Yeah. And Espicar points out points to something funny. Meanwhile, Aisha's like, so, wanna compare a mortal lover to compare to?
they have
Yeah.
such a beautiful, like,
Yeah, yeah, such
I
a
don't know what they
beautiful,
have, a
yeah,
beautiful relationship. They're
totally
a great,
roommates.
yeah, they're like a great couple. And
Yeah,
once again, I think a really interesting um example of representation
yeah,
in
yeah,
the series.
yeah. Because at the same time, like, uh, you can have, don't get me wrong, representation is great no matter what form it takes, but eventually we will have like an overrepresentation of sex positive gay people, you know? And and so it's great that we're already seeing some of these other representations of sexuality, not just in, what you're attracted to, but how you're attracted to it.
Definitely.
Where they're kind of like both, they're essentially married, but there's nothing quite physical in it. They both know that, like,
Yeah.
man, if only your skin was greener and you didn't have cow teeth, I'd be mega into you. You know,
Yeah.
I'll have to settle for just being like welded to the hip with you.
Yeah, they just connect on a different level. And I think that making that just sort of the way it is in the book,
Yeah,
one of the great things that EE does is it's all just presented so normal. It's all normalized, and nothing is sort of highlighted as like, oh, this is different and special. Here's my sort of like representation relationship.
yeah,
They're all just relationships that people are having, and I
yeah,
really, really like that. And then we
yeah.
go back to Robert.
And then we go back to Robber. The beast looked like a particularly dumb offspring of a bull and a gazelle if both those creatures had been morbidly obese. All in all, it was the size of a supply wagon and seemed intent to acting like a living battering ram. You really let yourself go, buddy, Robert informed it. You should be ashamed of yourself. Oh, man. and then just like, oh yeah, we're killing off like some of the devils, but this thing, we're just gonna take the pincushion approach. Cheerfully, the yellow-eyed Tribune threw some poor soul's good tea set at the thing and legged it towards the window. You know, not because it'll do anything, but because he specifically is pissing it off
Yeah.
and breaking somebody's tea set. You know? Um, the hammers fell with unseemly enthusiasm, breaking the keystones Pickler had marked and weakened a few days back. The house collapsed on top of the devil. It probably wasn't dead yet, unfortunately, since the roof had been mere thatch. Robber casually lit a pine wood match, and the other two sappers threw oil jugs in the rough location of the monster, setting the whole thing aflame without missing a beat. Ah.
Um, and then just the next major paragraph. Demolition charges took one of his big fuckers out when it tried to pursue, Lieutenant Rattler told him, wiping her hands clear of the oil. Calvin made those jugs. Sloppy work. If they hadn't confiscated them from local stocks, he would have complained about the quality. He still would, of course, but he'd have done it more if the 15th had actually paid for them.
Um,
just those like little insights into like just what a little shit he is. Just
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Love them.
And then also just like these, like sprinkled in between these wonderful moments of comedy are just points of like goblins knew the passage of time more intimately than any human or orc. Like they are precision creatures, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was uh, this little kip of theirs was the brainchild of Pickler and Hellhound. Goblin engineering married to the steel trap that was the legate's mind. You know, as much as Juniper's a tactical genius, every single goblin is above the rest of, you know, humanity and orc when it comes to like just knowing things casually, you know, just like, oh yeah, we're gonna need to take like they'll eyeball it and be like, yeah, it's a 15-degree angle, and they'll be like, they'll measure it and be like, yeah, it's 15 degrees, cool, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, give ground one block after another, bleeding them dry all the way as they tore themselves to pieces going through traps. Pickler's love letter to the Sapper Corps, he liked to think of it. And who was he to refuse such a heartfelt confession? And then we get to knock. Oh my goodness, we're gonna need to wrap this up soon because it's already getting close to
I
time.
know. Okay,
Okay,
right.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Just
So,
pick out one
knock.
cool thing about
Amazing,
this.
great. We love this boy. He is like if Juniper is like, yeah, I'm feeling myself kind of flex my orcdom through this love of like battle. Yeah. Um and Nock is like, no, I've learned that like the orc love of battle is the love of battle. I thought it'd been ruthlessness once, but here I am in the middle of it all, and I know that I am just like this is it. This is what my people do. Um and he and he has this beautiful moment of like we're not the most ruthless because I've seen the tower, you know. But we are. I am Knock of the Waxing Moons, and I want to sink my teeth into the enemy's flesh and feed until my belly is full. But I'm also Knock, commander of the 15th Legion, and I would remain where and I'm going to remain where I stand. And I'm going to see the Silver Spears ripped out root and stem. He's marrying the orc form of ruthlessness with the Praesi form of ruthlessness, where it's not just about kill, kill, kill. It's about killing your enemy and everyone they ever loved, and making sure the blood doesn't get on your nice gown. You know?
So I want to suggest that we actually wrap it up here instead of trying to rush the remainder of the chapter
Yeah,
in the
because
last minute
we
because
are about halfway through, and
yeah,
we do get so few options to take
hang
a
out with
moment
these
for this.
people. Yes. So I really want to enjoy it and make sure that we can discuss it. So,
Yeah. So I have some little announcements to make that don't affect our thing. We're still gonna be talking book club wise next week.
mhm.
Specifically, we're gonna be wrapping up Greenskins and then take on. Do we want to take our time and do just stand and deliver? And then we can do
Um,
because then we have slight and
yes,
draw.
I think so. I think so because I think Slight um, ends up
It's
being like a pretty an interesting chapter where we get to see sort of Hunter in action. So we don't want
yeah.
to
We
rush
don't
that
want to have
either.
that one be rushed at the end either.
Tinkles,
Yeah.
Tinkles is
Yeah.
also a hilarious
And
character.
yeah. And stand and deliver are specifically like a pair of chapters, so I want to make sure those stay together.
Hmm.
So yeah. So next week we'll be finishing up Greenskins and reading into stand and deliver. Um, and then after that we'll go on to the rest of it.
Great.
Cool. I've got some little announcements to make to the stream, and that's it. So if you wanna bounce, cool. All right.
I'll stay and listen to your announcements, but I don't
Okay.
have to listen to them offline.
So our conversation is gonna happen as normal, but for next book club, I'm gonna be in Kentucky
Oh,
in the
fun.
middle of a town called Yosemite. If you want to Google Maps it, essentially in the middle of just nowhere. Um, so, if you want to join in live, I will be posting instead of my usual stream link. I'll be posting in the Practical ID Evil Discord. I'll be posting my Discord server link. So if you want to join into the call and just listen in to listen live, that's how it's going to happen. I'm going to be using. I'm going to be recording it in this same style and then posting the VOD to YouTube, so we don't miss a thing. Yeah, it was an attempt, Espiquere, to make it Yosemite, but not Yosemite. So it's Yosemite. Spelled the exact same. One of the towns nearby is, and I can't say this not in accent, Pint Lick, Kentucky.
Oh my, okay.
It is a gem of a place. So next week I'll be dying of humidity, and we'll be having a great time. If you want to join in live, join in the Discord. Otherwise, you'll be seeing the VOD released fairly soon for that week. But yeah, so with that said, thank you so much, and everyone have a beautiful night.
Have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, and this will be the end of the stream. So